Hey folks, as an adventure athlete and someone who has, a daytime job and so many things in life, I've been looking for a smartwatch that's ready for adventure but also ready for daily life. Something I can connect my phone to that can keep track of fitness and health stuff, as well as have GPS capabilities, a compass, flashlight, things that I can use on adventures and in daily life. And I have found that finally in the Amazfit T-Rex 3. I have been wearing it for a while now, and it's so crazy because I actually forgot it at home yesterday, and I drove home from my work to get it because that's how integrated it has become in my daily life. And some of the unique features is it's super stylish, so it looks great. I'm actually getting a call on it literally right now, and I can see the caller ID and all that right here, and I'm going to go ahead. Hello? Hold on one second. I actually just got a call on it, and I could see who was calling right from my phone. I love that. That is so cool. But what I was going to say is we actually just had 2 hurricanes roll through, and I lost power for a lot of that. And we were running around like crazy, and I kept the watch on the whole time. It has an ultra-long 27-day battery life. And take it from me, that's true because I haven't charged it in a couple weeks, and it's still at 42%, which is crazy. But it keeps track of my steps and gives me insights into my goals. Obviously, I can check texts and phone calls from it. Has a little flashlight. It's so useful. What I also love is, man, some of these smartwatches are like $1,200, and people have been telling me, you got to have this, you got to have this. Well, I'm really happy with the purchase with Amazfit. It is a great deal. With over 40 million people using their products daily, I think they have a pretty great track record. So if you're interested in taking the jump into a smartwatch or another smart wearable of some sort from Amazfit, go to amazfit.com/ASP for Adventure Sports Podcast. And that's spelled amazfit.com/ASP. And then you can use the code for anything you find on their website, ASP, for 15% off any of their products. So like I said, I have the Amazfit T-Rex 3. I am really enjoying it. I'm wearing it right now. And the best part about it, my wife thinks it looks really nice on me. So, that seals the deal for me right there. Again, amazfit.com/ASP and use the code ASP at checkout. Hey folks, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Mason Gravely. Today we're starting this week off with a throwback. I remember this episode with Renata being just so inspiring. There's an amazing backstory that we'll get into, and I just really enjoyed this conversation. I'm still doing a lot of interviews for new episodes, but I wanted to build up my pool of new episodes a little more before we start playing them. Just because I'm just getting back into the swing of things after some hurricanes, and I'll actually be changing jobs next week, which is exciting. I'm leaving the brewery I've been working at for 5 years, Athletic Brewing, and I'm going to be going into full-time conservation work, which is super exciting. It's landscape conservation, wildlife conservation, and what's exciting about that is, the places we like to adventure, the places with trails, the places with everything from beaches to rivers to the medium in which we have adventure, things like through hiking and bike packing and national parks and all that happen on places that have been protected a lot of the times. Not all the time, but a lot of these adventures we talk about on this show are in places that people set aside the land to protect for nature to thrive. And I've been fascinated more and more with that process as I've gotten older, and I want to have a hand in helping shape these places and make more of them. And so that's what I'm doing. So I'm super excited. It's a direct connection to this podcast and the inspiration with these stories and who we talk to on this show. So I'm very excited. And that'll be next week. So I imagine there might be a few more hiccups in the podcast schedule as I get used to that new job, but it is going to be an adventure itself. That's for dang sure. So, all right, let's go ahead and dive in. All right, folks, welcome to the podcast. You heard a little bit about Renata's story in the intro. By the way, I record that afterwards, Renata. So I used to read everyone's accolades right here in front of them. But for someone with as long
as a list as you. One, I would leave something out. Two, I would mess something up. And it's just too much pressure. So I do that after the fact now. But anyway, Renata Hlumska, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I am so excited to talk. So where's home for you, and where are you coming from today, if those aren't the same place?
Well, my home since many, many years is a small town in Sweden, Jönköping. That's where I have my base camp. It's not too far from Gothenburg, a bit south of Stockholm. But I'm born and raised in the southern parts of Sweden, in Malmö, just across from Copenhagen. But yeah, Sweden is where I have my base. That's where I'm born and raised and where I reside.
From an adventure point of view, what is that area like? Is it known for having people doing the things that you do, or are you kind of a unique person for your area?
Well, I think that, Scandinavia in general and as well as Sweden, I think it doesn't really matter where in Sweden you're from. People do have a lot of adventure spirits in them. The area that I'm from is maybe not super known for adventures, but it's very outdoorsy. We have a fantastic big lake that you can have fun in all year round. There is something called the Highlands, so we do have quite a bit of snow in the winters. So there is both cross-country skiing, and you can do mountain biking. And there's a lot of activities and a lot of outdoorsy people here. But there are areas in Sweden that are maybe even more known for the adventure kind of sports.
I just talked to somebody that is climbing I think 11 or 15 2,000-meter peaks in Sweden in the north. Yeah. And they're doing it in one big trip, or they did it already. Jackie Passo.
Yeah.
And she is married to a famous Swedish ski mountaineer. I forgot his name. But anyway, I was just talking to them, and I was looking it up, and I said, this is unbelievable. There's like 1,000 miles of, north to south Sweden of just adventures to be had. It seems like such a fantastic place to build these skills and to build kind of the tenacity and the resilience you need for doing some of the things that you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think she's in Åre, which is has a very large skiing and free riding community. So yeah, if you're into that, then you should be in Åre, not in Jönköping where I am.
Oh man, that's awesome. Well, I tell you what, I know you've literally, there's probably 50 different podcast episodes that you have that we could talk about as far as adventures you've been on that would be full episodes or full books, honestly. And folks have heard some of that in the intro. But I think it would be best for us to focus on one. I've always found it a little easier with someone with as many adventures as you have to talk about one in specific, to really draw out the stories. And the one that I think would be the most interesting right now would be when you did the Around America adventure in the lower 48s of the United States. And there's not a ton I know about it. I'm very interested because I want to know why do this, and also how you did it. But could you talk about maybe exactly what that adventure is, and why the U.S.? Why did you choose this as the place to basically circumnavigate?
Well, that expedition and adventure was chosen for many different reasons, actually. At that time, the idea was born in 2000. And at that point, I was living together with a very well-known Swedish high-altitude climber, Göran Kropp. And he had been on Everest and K2 and Broad Peak and Shoyu, all 8,000-meter peaks, and we summited Everest together. And he was planning to do a very exciting expedition to actually solo sail down to the Antarctic, ski to the South Pole, and then sail home again. And we had started talking about doing that adventure together. And to be able to finance that and to train and prepare properly, we knew that we probably we'd be better off in the US, and also to start from there. And Seattle was a city where we had a few new friends, and it also has a large outdoor community. So we relocated to Seattle. And when we started planning, or we started thinking about how to go about getting sponsors and financing this huge expedition, we started looking at, we wanted to do something in the US to kind of get to know the new country that we had moved to get acquainted with the country and discover it in our way. And this expedition about circumnavigating the lower 48 states by our own strength started to take shape at that same time. That's kind of typical for me, and was for us, to have numerous expeditions going on at the same time. There's so much fun things to do, and so this started to shape. So we decided to do that expedition first, and kind of build us a name also in the US as adventurers, and easier to get finances for the bigger projects further on. And then, as some might know, Göran was killed in a climbing accident, and I still decided to fulfill that mutual dream that we had embarked on together. Or, well, we never started, but we had started to plan it together. And I really felt like I wanted to finish and get closure to that expedition and to that dream we had were going to do originally together. And it was an expedition that I really fell in love with, the whole adventure, because it was so different than anything I had done before. I mean, it's a very long time. Fortunately, I didn't know how big the US was. So that was, I mean, sometimes to be naive can be positive. So when I started thinking about it, I just thought about all those amazing contrasts. I mean, travel on the boundaries between extreme nature and extreme civilization, and discover the US in new eyes, and to paddle and to hike. The bike was added later when I really sat down and started planning it for a solo person, not a two-team expedition. So I added the bicycle, but I just fell in love with the project from the beginning and wanted to discover the US in my way.
It's such a unique, I mean, and I know the backstory of some of this, and so I know you've been interviewed a million times, so I don't want to take us through some of those same things, but
But I actually don't mind. I mean, I love talking about the adventures because it brings me back to when I was there, and I shine up when I think about it.
Yeah,
it's just fantastic to be fortunate enough to be able to do these things.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Just, I mean, you're legendary in so many ways. So this is so cool. But this adventure, like you said, it's long. I mean, it was over a year of being on the adventure itself. And I mean, so daunting. I know mountaineering is also really long expeditions. They can be months even. But there is a relatively short window compared to something like this that's going to take thousands and thousands of miles, so much effort and so much time. So it seems so different, especially from the world of climbing and mountaineering, where it's just a slower pace. Like, you circumnavigated the entire U.S. and you were trying to stay on water, but your bike, you actually pulled a kayak. And so what was the goal? To stay on the water as much as possible and only bike where you needed to? And if so, what did you do with the bike when you were kayaking, and vice versa?
Yeah, that's a very common question. And the whole idea was originally to circumnavigate the lower 48 states. So not Alaska and Hawaii. I didn't want
two
to
of the
be
best
out for 10
states,
years.
of course. Two of the best states.
Yeah. So what I did was I started in Seattle and I paddled the entire Pacific coast down to San Diego. And then I turned eastwards and followed the Mexican border all the way to Texas and the Gulf of Mexico. And then I was going to paddle the whole intracoastal waterway, but due to the Hurricane Katarina, I had to take some other alternative routes there, bicycling instead of only paddling. And then around Florida, the Keys down to the Everglades and Key West, and then up the entire Atlantic coast up to Eastport in Maine, and then, following the Canadian border back to Seattle. And originally, we were only going to paddle and walk. But when I decided to do this by myself, I added the bicycle because I really love to bicycle. I've bicycled from Nepal to Sweden. I used to compete in bicycling. So bicycling is a fantastic way to get around. And of course, I realized that to have the bicycle with me on the kayak will be everything can work. And I looked at different foldable bikes actually to be able to have the bike with me, because the advantage of having a bike with me is that when the days on the ocean or if the waves are too big and the swells are too big and it becomes too risky to paddle, I can always get up on land and bicycle, which of course is also a fast way of transporting myself and the kayak. But those foldable bikes, it just didn't work, and it wasn't good for the balance on the kayak. So instead, I had a small trailer with me the whole time, though. So I could always load the kayak on a trailer, and actually had a rig so I could pull the kayak on the trailer behind me so I could walk instead. So the bicycle was picked up in a few different locations along the route. So that was all planned ahead. But the kayak was with me the whole way around. So I never shipped the kayak or sent it. That was with me the whole time. So it really became my companion.
And so I'm gonna have to include some pictures, because you literally, like you just said, your kayak was essentially on a little set of wheels, a trailer, and you would pull it behind your bike the whole time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
walking. When I was walking, I had it with me, which actually was a fantastic way to get around. I'm used to carrying heavy backpacks, but to have a kayak that weighed, fully loaded, it weighed over 100 kilos. I'm not really sure how much that is in pounds, but it's heavy, and you could never carry that on your back. So to have that on the trailer was really good, because then I could have extra water and extra food and all my stuff, all my gear with me.
Wow. 220 pounds is what that is for the, so that's a little bit, I'm about 200 pounds. So probably another, me plus a backpack. And that's what you were pulling around the whole time. So.
And I had days around, there was one stretch past the coast of Massachusetts where it was raining for like 30 days. It was big showers and thunderstorms and floods. So I couldn't paddle because it just became too dangerous. So I walked, which also was kind of tricky because there was floods everywhere. But I still managed to walk like 25 miles per day. So when I walk, that's what I did per day, the same distance that I actually paddled per day. And that I could never have done that if I didn't have the kayak on a trailer, or probably not.
Unbelievable. So, having been based in Seattle a while, which is just a stunning area here in the States, beautiful place, wonderful place to go. There's this phenomenon when you're planning an adventure, at least for me, and I've heard it from other adventures, where you're looking at a map, you're studying these routes, you're studying the logistics, and so you create a mental picture of what it's going to be like. And, you've never been in these places, but then being there is so different than you can imagine. It happens to me, every time I look at a map of a place I've never been and then go, it's just always different, and it's always fun to see how much of a difference it's going to be. Where did you maybe experience that along the route? One of the first locations, or one of the most impactful, because you covered a lot of ground that you'd probably never been to before.
Let's take a quick message break and hear from the folks that help make this show possible. There are so many advantages and benefits to learning new languages. And for outdoor and adventure athletes and explorers like those of you listening, it helps to know at least some conversational language into the places that we're traveling. Not to mention all the cognitive benefits, the ability to, appreciate a culture much more deeply, and peace of mind when traveling on international trips. It can be really difficult, but one of the most trusted names in learning language is Rosetta Stone, and today's podcast is sponsored by Rosetta Stone. It is the most trusted language learning program available on desktop, available as an app. It's super easy and user-friendly, and they've been doing this for over 30 years with millions of users who have gone to have wonderful experiences learning new languages. They have built-in true accent feature, which gives you feedback on your own pronunciation. It's like having a personal trainer for your accent. It's convenient. You can engage with the program anytime, anywhere. You can learn on the go, right with your phone. And lifetime memberships come with 25 languages. And that is what they are offering you today. There's no better time than right now to get started. Adventure Sports Podcast listeners can get Rosetta Stone's lifetime membership for 50% off. Again, that's lifetime membership for 50% off. Visit rosettastone.com/today. That's 50% off, unlimited access to 25 language courses for the rest of your life. Redeem your 50% off at rosettastone.com/today. Warmer, sunnier days are calling, and you can fuel up with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. You can meet your wellness goals, have fresh, never frozen meals that are smart, protein plus, even keto, diet friendly, dietitian approved, and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. And having a newborn in the house, any sort of time-saving meal option is ideal. And every time we have kids, we do a meal prep service. And for our most recent child, we are choosing Factor meals. They have 30 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week to make your day delicious, from sun up with breakfast to sundowns and snacks and everything in between. There's all sorts of ways to customize it for whatever your dietary needs are. And if you want to try Factor meals, go to factormeals.com/ASP50 and use the code ASP50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. Again, that's code ASP50 at Factor Meals, FACTOR meals.com/ASP50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off next month while your subscription is active. That is plenty of that for now. Let's get back into the episode.
Oh, absolutely. And I did so much planning. I planned this for 5 years. I even did like a reconnaissance trip along the entire Washington coast just to get the view of build that mental image in my head of what it was I would be facing. But I pretty soon realized that to do that or to try and cover more of the coast, that won't help me, because even if, you can go to the same area several times, but the weather and the conditions will change. So it still can feel like a new place. I felt that when I've been on mountains. I do a lot of guiding on Kilimanjaro. And I've been there, like 8 or 9 times. And every time I go, even if I know the mountain by heart, it still is a new experience, because it's the conditions change or it's new people on the trip. So I knew that I have to kind of have the mindset and the attitude that every day will be unexpected. And I don't know what will be around the next corner or around the next bend. And it's that. And that's what I like about being on an adventure, that you really don't know what to expect and what it's going to look like. And all the places that I came to and visited, it was overwhelming and so much more beautiful than I could have imagined. The Pacific coast, I've seen sunsets from small beaches that it felt like nobody had ever camped on before, probably hadn't, that nobody had seen before. So it felt really exclusive and unique because with the kayak you can get to all these small coves and places where larger boats don't get access to, or you don't get access to from land. So it's hard to choose some. I mean, just every day was surprised me in one way or another.
What was maybe one of your biggest fears or apprehensions going into it? And was it realized, or was it surprisingly non-existent?
Well, that was actually my largest fear and worry was not the nature or the ocean or animals. People, when I was talking about this expedition, which I was for many years, since I planned it for 4 years or 5 years, and people knew what I was going to do. So I had to face a lot of questions and sometimes doubts, and everybody's like, oh, what about the great white shark, and what about, alligators around Florida? And so I actually did as much as a bit of research, and I met people who know much more about the sea life, and there is a good marine center in Seattle, so I paid them a visit and I asked about the great white shark. Do I need to worry? And they just laughed and they said, don't worry about the sharks in the water, worry about the sharks on land. And that's really what I felt, that people will be what I actually will fear the most, which is, it's sad to say, but it's the truth. And traffic and passing larger cities. I knew it was going to take me like 4 or 5 days to paddle past Los Angeles. You don't pitch a tent on Venice Beach. So how will I manage those kind of challenges? So people was what I was mostly worried about, how they would greet me, how they would approach me, and how they would react to what I was doing. And I prepared really for situations where people would not be so nice, and had tactics on how to act if somebody got within different. I kind of had these circles of safety if somebody got too close, how I would act and so on. But I never had to implement it, fortunately. It was completely the opposite. I met people who were so friendly and so helpful and so genuinely fascinated and excited about what I was doing. And I got adopted 3 times. So I have like surrogate families in the US.
You got adopted 3 times, you said.
Yeah. So it actually restored my faith in human kindness in many ways. Because wherever I stopped, whenever I needed help, I mean, it was overwhelming how friendly people were. There was just one area where I kind of faced a bit of a harsher attitude, which probably wasn't maybe even harsh, but I kind of had, since I hadn't faced it for so long, just to get that somebody questioned what I was doing was a surprise. And that was in the very south, past Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. And that was due to the hurricane and that situation, that the people in that area, I mean, that was, they were fighting, had lost their homes and just were in a very difficult situation. And there I was, fulfilling my dream. So there it collided a bit, but otherwise people were super, super friendly.
So tell us about that. I was going to ask, you went through it, such a collision of worlds,
yeah,
quite literally. But also I remember on one of my bike trips, my first one, my big trip, 5,000 miles across the U.S. and Canada, and I went through Joplin, Missouri, right after tornadoes went through. I'm talking a week maybe, to where, I mean, people had died and lost their homes, and it looked like a war zone. And here we are biking through. this sensation of guilt, the sensation of really not taking things for granted. And it is the conversation you have in your head. What am I doing out here? But you don't set out to kind of throw that in people's face. It just kind of happens. You know what I mean? You don't mean to go through these areas at the time that they're feeling, doing their worst. But it happened for you in a much bigger way than mine through Katrina. That was just a legendary, awful place. There was lots of people from our area here in Florida that actually went to volunteer. My wife organized a whole team to go up there and volunteer. But what was it like for you going through there? Could you see the devastation from the point of view of the water?
I mean, I avoided the water because of all the debris and just safety reasons. Not a good
you were
place
on land
to be.
that time.
I bicycled, yeah, which also was. I stayed in motels, which was like I shouldn't be here because there's people who really have nowhere to stay that should, be here. So it like you said, it felt like a war zone, and I just tried to pass that as quickly as possible. Not being noticed because I really felt I was in the wrong place doing the wrong thing. And I can completely understand and fully understand why people were, wondering who I was and why I was there and about the timing and everything. So I just tried to, sneak through in a way and not make a big fuss about what I was doing. Otherwise, when I get into a diner and people are curious of what I'm doing, I would, happily talk about my expeditions and people would get excited. And here they're like, what are you doing here? So it was like, I'm just passing through.
Do you remember, once you passed that area, do you remember anything about the Tampa Bay or
beautiful
that area in Florida, Sarasota, St. Pete? I live right there near Anna Maria Island, and you had to have gone right past here, is what I'm saying. I'm right on the coast, so I wish I'd have known about this. I mean, I was much, I wouldn't have been into this at that age, but it's so cool that you went right by here.
Yeah, and the white beaches that actually, they kind of squeak when you walk on them is just fantastic. And all these string of islands. God, I forgot all the names of them, but
I think the area is called 10,000 Islands, so I think you can afford to forget a few of their names.
So I've camped on quite a few of those. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Beautiful.
In the Everglades too. That was a very unique area.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
And I was there in winter time, so the conditions were really, really good. And so I knew I had a window of like 16 months because I really needed to be in certain areas of the US in certain time of the year to avoid, like the hurricane season and not being in the Great Lakes in winter time and being on the West Coast in the summertime when the swells aren't as big. So I really had this window of 16 months. Couldn't be too fast, but not too slow either. So,
wow.
Florida was really, really nice, and paddled past Naples into the canals there. So, I mean, I was in no hurry. I've never been in a hurry on my expeditions, and try and see the surroundings as much as possible and spend time and enjoying what I do, even if it's hard sometimes. I mean, it's about learning and meeting people and just getting a sense of the area that I'm in and what it looks like and the people that are there, and that's what was so amazing about this trip. There were so many contrasts. It felt like I didn't pass one country. I mean, I passed several countries.
Yeah, it's a big place and lots of cultures and lots of diversity. Did you tell us? You mentioned how much it restored your faith in humanity, this experience, and seeing the kindness, and I agree. I don't know if I've never done a big mountaineering expedition, so I don't know if you just don't get as much of that. I imagine you don't get as much as that human interaction just by chance. You obviously have your crew or your team in base camp and all that and camps going up mountains, but not just spur of the moment interactions with other, quote, normal people. And I wonder, could you share a story where maybe that faith in humanity was restored, something that just happened on the experience? Maybe you're having a bad day, or just a unique encounter with a person that really made you feel, I'm so glad I'm out here doing this.
But I mean, every time that I stop to mend a flat tire, cars would stop and they would ask me if I need help. And sometimes I did, and sometimes I didn't. And there was one woman who, I think something had broken on the bicycle, and I was in the middle of nowhere and kind of didn't really know how to fix it. And she said, well, I can give you a ride. And then she gave me a ride. I think she had a pickup truck, so we could take everything on the truck and got to the nearest town. And I was starting to mend the bicycle. And then I realized I need to do, while I'm there, other errands. And she was like, yeah, you can take my car and do what you need to do. So she borrowed me her car. I mean, it's like, in what other world would people borrow you your car and let you drive around and do your errands?
Wow.
So just that was, it's so surprising. And people invited me to stay with them. And there was one family that I met in Cannon Beach in California. They were having a family reunion in a huge camping ground in Cannon Beach. And I had pitched my tent in a small slot, like between two huge RV trucks, those kind of that expand, that have washing machines and drying machines and or dryers and
yes.
Microwaves and dishwashers and everything, and sitting in my Hilleberg tent and cooking my freeze-dried food on a small Primus stove. And they looked at me and they said, okay, what are you doing? So they invited me over for their barbecue, and we had s'mores and really connected. And they were so intrigued by what I was doing. And they lived in Orange County. So they said, and I told them about the challenges I knew I would face passing Los Angeles. And they said, we will help you. So when I got closer to LA, they gave me their number. So I called them and told them my location when I had paddled for that day. And they would come and pick me up and drive me to their home. Sharon, the mom, she had learned she found a recipe how to do Swedish pancakes. So she did Swedish pancakes for me, and then they would drive me out to the same location next day so that I could continue paddling. So I could sleep safe, and they would feed me, and then I could do my paddling during the day. They did that for 4 days. That was one of the families. They adopted me, and they would actually call me on every Sunday for like a few years after the expedition, because that's the day when they called all their kids. And they actually came to Seattle when I finished my expedition September 15th. They flew to Seattle to greet me.
Oh my gosh, that's giving me chills. That's giving me chills.
It's just amazing, the Koskas. So I hope they hear this, because they were just fantastic people. And I mean, I've met fantastic people on other expeditions too. It's not like when I've been away in Nepal or Pakistan or Iran. Or Europe or South America. People are most of the times really friendly, but then I kind of expected more, because I'm out on an expedition where I expect to meet more people who live in nature, who are surrounded with mountains. So here I was more prepared to meet people who live in the cities and who are not necessarily into what I'm doing. So I think that's why I was preparing more to face people, that might have a different outlook on life than I have. While in Nepal or in these other places, I kind of didn't have my guard high as I did when I went to the US.
Wow. That is amazing. And I know it's one of the major themes on this show is that the world is so much more helpful than you might think it is, or so much, I won't say safer for everyone, but just say it's safer. Like you put yourself out there on an experience, people are excited to help. It's almost like you create an experience for others as well, because I mean, just as much as they had an impact on you, you clearly had an impact on them for them to spend their time and money to, for one, call you, and then to host you, and then to come see you. That clearly created something exciting for them to be a part of, and that's the cool thing about adventure is when you do things like this, especially that go through towns and go through areas with people. You're as much as they're breaking up your kind of monotonous cycle, you're breaking up theirs to help them have something exciting to do too. We host cyclists at our home, and I get so excited every time one comes by because it's like stories, and I interview them, and we get to feed them and just see, send them off on their way the next day. It's a blessing for us as much as it is for them.
Yeah, I feel the same. Unfortunately, not so many bikers pass Jönköping, but I've had a few.
Oh man, well, I want to ask this too. You obviously went across, the Pacific and the Atlantic. You kayaked and cycled in combination. There's lots of people along those routes. Biggest cities in America are along the coasts. But then you also did the borders of Canada and Mexico. Can you talk about, which are very different, very, very different, I imagine. I don't know. I have cycled the Mexican border, the U.S.-Mexican border, and I've cycled a lot around Canada too. So I do think there's a lot of differences there. Could you talk to us about the different challenges as far as like logistically getting through it? Because I know there's a river along part of the U.S. and Mexico border, the Rio Grande. What was that like? And how did they differ? How did the two borders differ there?
I think it was a huge difference. I mean, I did paddle parts of the Rio Grande, Big Bend National Park in Texas, just fantastic. And the park rangers there were really, really helpful to give me information about the river and what to think about and safety aspects, because I mean there are people trying to get across the border. So I saw a lot of U.S. border patrols, and so that was kind of present. Big parts of that. Of the U.S.-Mexican border, and the climate. I mean, it's desert, very, very warm. A lot of ghost towns, it felt like. A lot of large, long stretches with absolutely nothing, which is in some parts in North Dakota and Montana as well. And I actually bicycled into parts of Canada because I wanted to avoid some major cities like Detroit, for instance. So I decided to cross over into Canada instead. But just different climate-wise. It just felt more. I mean, the nature is not just the nature is different, but it felt I met more people in around Wisconsin and Minnesota. The New Mexico and Arizona and Texas I didn't encounter as much people there, just this feeling that I have or remember. But it's just different. I can't say specifically what. The food also was different. I mean, I ate wherever I could. So a lot of diners, which of course in the US is kind of the same no matter where you are. But just felt like two different countries in a way, but still the same language and in many ways the same food as well, I guess. So I can't say any specific differences.
Wow. So what was maybe an area that surprised you the most as far as what you expected and what the reality was?
I mean, I was surprised in some ways, kind of every day. But at the same time, I had prepared so much for this expedition. I had put 5 years into the planning and the preparation and the training, and I had been to the States and talked to kayaking clubs and tried to get as much input and information as possible. I paddle stretches of Washington coast training. I had been to New York before and to Florida, so, I mean, to be honest, I don't know, besides what I mentioned before about how super friendly everybody was, but that was in one way not a surprise. It shouldn't have surprised me as much, because whenever I've been to the US, even besides being, doing the expedition, people have been very friendly. That's something that we joke about in Sweden, that the American people can sometimes feel superficial, I think it's called, because they're very like, hi, how are you doing? Have a nice day. But they're not really interested in how you're really doing. While it's kind of nice that people at least greet you and say hi, and that they ask, even if they don't want to know your whole medical journal, which is completely fine. I prefer that than people not even saying hi to each other. So, I mean, the people are really friendly. I just kind of rediscovered that when I did this expedition, I think. But what surprised me, I think I was really prepared for a lot. So I don't know and I knew that the nature was going to be fantastic. I think what surprised me is that it is so big. I think when I knew that I did 18,200 kilometers, 11,300 miles. I knew I was covering an amazing distance, but I think it wasn't until I kind of really started that I realized, after 1 week of paddling, when I had the entire map, I kind of had moved, 1 inch, even if 1 inch, maybe even less. So I just, how huge it is, and the diversity, and I think that kind of, even if I knew it, it just became so real.
So fascinating. Gosh, so much on this adventure, and just one of your adventures. It's so wild. So what was maybe an experience along here? Tell us about one of the hardest days, or one of the days that just sticks out to you as, wow, that was an extremely difficult, or maybe the crux of the experience, where I don't know if you ever doubted if you could finish, but maybe the day that was the closest to that, if possible.
Well, I have 2 days that are very still are very, very clear in my head.
Hey, that's not too bad for 400 plus days.
Well, I try not to focus on the difficult things.
Yeah.
I try to focus on the positive things. But there are 2 days that will never fade, I think. And that was Kayak Beach. I left north of Kayak Beach. I left early in the morning paddling, and listened to the weather radio, and they reported that there were going to be, large, severe swells, and the weather was going to change for the worst, but it changed a lot faster, and kind of get into a meditative state when I was paddling, and you're just in those swells, and I kind of got blind in seeing how high they really were, and suddenly I felt like just surrounded by huge swells that felt like they were, like houses. And I kind of said, okay, this is not good. I have to get closer up on land and get out of here. So I was still kind of always close to land, but I just realized I can't continue paddling in these conditions. And then, of course, when I have to get up on land, that's when the swell starts to break and became, just huge dumping waves. And it just became too much for me to manage. And even if I could manage the kayak, and I'm a good, decent paddler, stills. The waves were too big, and to try and maneuver a kayak that weighs 100 kilos. I mean, it's like a projectile. It's like a missile. The waves just catches it, and they caught me, and I tumbled around and flew out of the boat and under the waves and felt like I was in a washing machine. And I know something hit me, and I think it was the kayak. And I knew that I can't get in between the land and the boat. I just have to be, so I don't get hit by it again, because every time the waves catches the boat, it just can hit me with this massive force. So try and locate where I am, where land is, where I am, and where the boat was. And eventually I'm thrown up on land, washed up on land like a wet piece of cloth, and just lying there. And my boat, the kayak, also is washed up on land. And but nothing broke. The kayak was whole, and me as well. But that was a tumbling, unpleasant experience. That kind of made me realize that you do become blind sometimes for the circumstances, because you get so used to them. I mean, today, if somebody would put me on the Pacific Ocean to paddle, I would probably react if the waves were like, 20, 30 centimeters or half a meter, or definitely a meter. Suddenly you're in waves that are 2-3 meters, and you don't even react because you're so used to it. But the danger can be there, it's still present. So that kind of was an eye-opener. And I started practicing a new technique. So next time that the waves were very big, I started paddling backwards onto land. So instead of facing land with the front of the kayak, I turned around and I would face the waves with the front of the kayak. So I surfed backwards on the waves, which made it a lot safer. And after that, I was never in a bad situation again.
Wow. Unbelievable. Yeah, I'm sure that was very, very scary.
Yeah, and scary because I didn't want anything to break, the boat to hit the reef or something, and definitely not me either. And then there was one episode on my way to Rio Grande where there was a very steep hill. And I didn't realize when I was bicycling that, well, actually, I got to this crossroad. This was felt like it was a movie. It was this small town that felt very deserted, and there was this typical American house with a huge porch, and there was a man sitting on the porch in a rocking chair. And I like to strike conversations with people. So I asked him, I have a map, there's 2 different ways to go, and more just to talk to him, I asked, which route would you recommend? And he said, I would definitely recommend the scenic route. And I asked, which one is that? And he showed me which route. And I said, that's probably the one I would have chosen anyway. So I head out on that. But it's just that what he didn't tell me was that one of the steepest hills in Texas is on that road, which must have made him.
I don't know if he probably never biked it, honestly.
or he kind of felt like that was his intention to send me off on the most difficult route instead of saying, well, that's the scenic route, but I wouldn't choose that because that's really, really steep. So, because even if you go with a car, it's really, really steep. So I had to pull my kayak up that hill, and I have that on video, and I cry when I reach the crest. I was completely exhausted. And I knew that I can't stop in the middle of the hill, because if I stop, I will never get this trailer rolling again. Not in that up direction. It will pull me back down again.
Wow.
But I did it.
You did it. You did it. Wow. That is unbelievable. Well, tell us, that's a low light. Tell us maybe one thing that you look back on with a lot of fondness, an area or a story, something that happened that you think, wow, that's exactly why I would do this. That maybe didn't involve people. Could be animals, could be scenery.
I mean, I've I've seen, I've had dolphins swim under the boat, blowing out bubbles. I've seen whales and have seen sea otters, and those encounters are just magical. When you paddle in the kelp and you see those sea otters, and they actually don't spot you immediately, so it's almost like you're sneaking up on them because you're so quiet in the kayak, and I'm kind of have to keep myself from giggling because the sea otters don't see me, and suddenly they do, and they're like surprised. Where did she come from? And those were just such dear moments, and that happened quite a few times when you surprise the animals, but really surprise them. It's not like they see you from a distance and they know, okay, I know that she's coming and I have it under control, but you actually sneak up on them and surprise them, and you can see it in their faces that they have, that was fun. And all the sunrises and the sunsets and pitching my tent on a beach where I remember there was one place where I'd pitched my tent, and there was a stream running from some rocks or some hills, and that kind of almost created a pool in the sand with fresh water. So I was lying there in the evening taking a bath, seeing this amazing, really a natural spring of some sort, and having a freshwater bath in the middle of nowhere, all by myself. And it's like, it doesn't get better than this. To pinch myself to believe that you can have moments like that.
Wow. That's why we do adventure.
Yeah.
So as you approach the end of this experience, I know that there were people waiting on you at the finish line. I know that the mayor eventually made an official day for you in Seattle, which is amazing. And I wanted, what were you feeling as you approached? Did it feel like I'm ready to be done, or was it I could keep this thing going?
I think I was pretty ready.
Imagine.
I was, although I wouldn't, have it undone for anything. But I think when you start kind of heading home, or you start getting that sensation that you will make it to the finish line and it's getting closer, then the focus on finishing becomes very present. You don't have to keep it away, because if I was only thinking about finishing too early, then that wouldn't be, too early on the expedition to look forward to finishing, then that's not a good sensation to carry around for 14 and a half months. But to know that I have 2 weeks left or 1 week left, and really let that sink in, and to have time to realize that, I've been doing this for 14 months, packing and unpacking and packing and unpacking every day, more or less, and moving from one place to another, not sleeping in the same bed for more than a few days. That starts to sink in, and how different that life is, and how simple that life is in many ways. It's the agenda of the day was to transport myself from A to B, and to do that in the smartest, safest, most efficient way possible, and as enjoyable way as possible. Life on an expedition and that kind of an adventure becomes really simple. A life at home can be so much more complex, and started thinking about how to the next phase of the expedition, or the next phase of the project, because an expedition for me has different phases. I have the training and the preparation and the planning, then I have the execution part, and then I have the part that comes after, which is where I actually have to try and make the most of the investment that the execution part and the expedition part actually is, because I do have sponsors, there is documentary being made about it, and that's when that work starts. So that kind of, I allow myself to sink into that, to start thinking about that next part or that next leg, and let those thoughts slip out, or think about that a bit more. So it's a kind of an acclimatization, but in the other way around. Like, I'm preparing for the expedition before I'm starting, and to have those few weeks before I finish cross the finish line is important to start realizing that now life will be completely different again. So I was looking forward to finishing and start doing that next part, and kind of was really happy that I didn't have to paddle or bike anymore. I'll never forget the first morning waking up in Seattle after finishing on September 15th and looking out over a very gray Puget Sound, laying in an apartment hotel, having my family there, looking out through these huge glass windows, seeing the ferries over to Bainbridge Island, seeing the route that I had paddled, both going out of the sound because I started in the Ballard Locks in Lake Union and paddled out, and then paddled in again, and lying there and kind of pulling the blanket or the sheet over my back and saying, I don't have to get out of bed today. I can lie here and look at the Puget Sound, but I don't have to get in a kayak and paddle. That was a nice sensation.
I was going to ask that if you remember the first day of not having to get back up and do anything.
On the other hand, 3 days later, I was out paddling anyway, because we wanted to do some filming, some footage when I was kayaking in huge waves and big swells, and I didn't want to do that during the expedition. So I still was in the kayak 3 days later.
You can't stop.
I know, and I still love paddling. So, and I always will.
I remember after my first big adventure, 5,000 miles, so 8,000 kilometers or so. I had been gone 2 months. I was in college, so I was home for the summer. I biked home from Alaska, and I got up the next morning, and I was at my mom's house. I got up the next morning and said, Mom, I'm going to bike to my dad's house. It's about 3 miles away. They're divorced, but they live close by. And she goes, oh, you can't bike on that road. It's dangerous. And I said, Mom, I just came here from Alaska to this house on that same road. I'm going to go to Dad's house. And I just remember thinking, what a funny juxtaposition from being out there for so long and then back in this other world. But for you, what do you think is among the biggest lessons you learned on this experience specifically versus your other adventures?
I mean, this expedition for me was had so many other layers to it than other expeditions that I've done, and that has, of course, a lot to do with my relationship with Göran, who I was going to do the expedition with, and I ended up doing it alone. For me, it really was rediscovering myself in many ways, and it was an important expedition for me personally to do. And even, I mean, I kind of knew that this is who I am and this is what I want to do, but living in an amazing relationship that we had for many years, and I was quite young when we met, I've many times been faced with women who look at me and they say, oh, you poor thing, he drags you around all these mountains and you have to sleep in tents and you can't shower properly. And I was like, okay, I started from their questions, I started kind of, or their attitude, I started almost questioning, is this really me, or am I doing it because I'm in a relationship with somebody who loves the outdoors, although I know I love the outdoors. But for me, this was important to find out, is this really me? Or did I enjoy doing all these expeditions that I did because I lived with a fantastic man and adventurer? And to really discover that this is me, because otherwise I would not have been able to finish this expedition. For me, that was important to get grounded in that, and also to discover again, well, not maybe discover, but to once and for all know that people and humans and I am capable of so much more than one initially might think. If you break it down into smaller steps, if you go about things, solve the one problem and then the next problem and then the next problem. And if you use your imagination and creativity, there's always ways to move forward. And when you have those dreams, to deconstruct them into manageable pieces and start placing them in the right place and in the right position, and you will build that road to be able to move forward. I think it just made me even more sure that people have amazing capacity to do amazing things, and many times it's just oneself, that is the biggest hurdle to overcome. Your own mindset and belief that you can do it.
Amazing reflection there. And I want to hear too, as we wrap up, is there anything else you want listeners to know? And also, what is next for you? What is on the horizon for you? I know you've done so much, and I know we can't get into all that in this interview, but what is coming up for you that you're excited about?
Well, I really appreciate you asking what I would like people to remember. And I did an expedition in the US. For me, that was exotic because that's not where I live. But it's so many people's backyard. And to rediscover what is in your backyard, because there is so much to do and so much fun things to fill your days with or your free spare time with, and you don't have to travel across the world to do it, although I have done it. I'm rediscovering my backyard here in Sweden, in Jönköping, all the time, and that the adventures are around the corner, around our own corner, and we have to become better in seeing those and appreciating those. So what is exotic, for people come to Sweden to experience adventure, and we live here. So it's just about having that, to seeing your backyard with new eyes. And it doesn't have to be far away and expensive and dangerous to be an adventure. It's up to us what we want to do, how we portray an adventure, and how we see things. So I really want to encourage people to go out and discover, and to do it in a spontaneous and fun way, and not focusing on it being challenging and difficult and far away. Adventure can be in your backyard. I started pitching tents in my backyard with my kids, and that's some of the most fun things we have done.
Fantastic.
Now I have to kind of contradict myself a bit, though, because my next expedition is to space.
I've been reading about that.
So that's a bit far away from the corner, but yes. I guess I'm one of those that have to push the boundaries. And so I've always wanted to discover space, and that's kind of the final frontier. So it's not a long trip, it's a very short trip, but I feel very happy to one day be able to do it and to see Earth from the outside. I think that's gonna change my perspective on many things. Summiting Everest and seeing the world from that perspective, from the top of the highest mountain in the world, changed me forever. And I think seeing the world from the outside will probably have an even larger impact and make me even more realize the challenges that we have. We have to do a lot of changes in many things here on Earth. And I think a lot of more people should actually leave the planet to see it from the outside. Might help them take better decisions. So that's my next trip. I'm booked with Virgin Galactic to go out to space in 2 or 3 years.
I was going to ask if there's a date. I know that the original plan was right as the pandemic started, so it was delayed, but that's exciting. Well, after that, we'll have to have you back on, and those will be two very different experiences than the one that we're talking about. So I would love to hear your thoughts after that experience. That would be an exciting thing to talk about. We've had one astronaut on the show who's been to space.
Yeah.
So I'd love to make it a second one. It's not something we talk about a lot because obviously not a lot of people have gone. So,
well, I would actually love this whole trip. I kind of hope that it will be a preparation because I do have a bigger goal, and that is to climb the highest mountain on the moon. So yeah, there's mountain climbing to do in space as well.
That will absolutely be worth a podcast episode if that ever gets done. That is fantastic.
So that's maybe more the proper topic on this podcast then.
Okay. Awesome. Well, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us and deep diving into one adventure. And maybe we'll have you back on to talk about some of the other ones as well.
I would love to.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for having me again.
First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to this show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to grow in the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun. Hey folks, as an adventure athlete and someone who has, a daytime job and so many things in life, I've been looking for a smartwatch that's ready for adventure but also ready for daily life. Something I can connect my phone to that can keep track of fitness and health stuff, as well as have GPS capabilities, a compass, flashlight, things that I can use on adventures and in daily life. And I have found that finally in the Amazfit T-Rex 3. I have been wearing it for a while now, and it's so crazy because I actually forgot it at home yesterday, and I drove home from my work to get it because that's how integrated it has become in my daily life. And some of the unique features is it's super stylish, so it looks great. I'm actually getting a call on it literally right now, and I can see the caller ID and all that right here, and I'm going to go ahead. Hello? Hold on one second. Actually just got a call on it, and I could see who was calling right from my phone. I love that. That is so cool. But what I was going to say is we actually just had 2 hurricanes roll through, and I lost power for a lot of that. And we were running around like crazy, and I kept the watch on the whole time. It has an ultra-long 27-day battery life. And take it from me, that's true because I haven't charged it in a couple weeks, and it's still at 42%, which is crazy. But it keeps track of my steps and gives me insights into my goals. Obviously, I can check texts and phone calls from it. Has a little flashlight. It's so useful. What I also love is, man, some of these smartwatches are like $1,200, and people have been telling me, you got to have this, you got to have this. Well, I'm really happy with the purchase with Amazfit. It is a great deal. With over 40 million people using their products daily, I think they have a pretty great track record. So if you're interested in taking the jump into a smartwatch or another smart wearable of some sort from Amazfit, go to amazfit.com/ASP for Adventure Sports Podcast. And that's spelled amazfit.com/ASP. And then you can use the code for anything you find on their website, ASP, for 15% off any of their products. So like I said, I have the Amazfit T-Rex 3. I am really enjoying it. I'm wearing it right now. And the best part about it, my wife thinks it looks really nice on me. So, that seals the deal for me right there. Again, amazfit.com/ASP and use the code ASP at checkout.